And there we go. Saw that on an old YouTube video many years ago during its heyday. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is May 18th, 2024. For a special edition tropical update, we're coming at you out of the Weather Center on this beautiful Saturday morning. Beautiful for a large majority of us. We do still have some significant weather activity working its way through the Dakotas, up in Minnesota, towards the Great Lakes, and especially down here in the southeast, we still have some pretty intense convective activity making its way through Alabama, Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, moving slowly into South Carolina, trying to spread up the mid-Atlantic coastline. Today, we are not going to fixate on anything else outside of this geographic area here. I'm going to draw it in for you guys to take a look right now. We have some very interesting phenomena that's expected to take place over northern South America and get pulled to the north by this trough that's making its way through the eastern United States as we speak. We'll give it a few moments for some folks to join in. Good morning, Alfalfa Bill Enjoyer, Zen, Supercharas, Brenda. Thank you for joining us. I will get into a little bit of a discussion on what Puerto Rico could see, and I also want to dispel a little bit of the rumors that are floating around social media right now. And I'll honestly tell you right out of the gate, this has a 1% chance out of 100 of becoming anything tropical. I don't see this becoming a named system at all whatsoever. We have a very low threat chance of it spinning up. For my long-term followers, like to call this another pseudo-Vince. We saw this signal a multitude of times in October and November, especially of last hurricane season. We had entities particularly on the GFS being lifted up from the southern Caribbean, parts of South America, Central America, that looked like they wanted to become a bona fide tropical cyclone, and nothing happened. We do have threats on the table. We do have some very intense weather activity on the table, particularly for Dominican Republic, Haiti, Hispaniola. We're going to examine the threat chances for the Turks and Caicos down in the southern Bahama Island chain there, as well as eastern Cuba, Jamaica, and we can't forget about our folks in Puerto Rico, the U.S. British Virgin Islands. As I kind of painted in our thumbnail today, there is a pretty good chance that this is going to lift straight up towards the north-northeast in response to a upper tropospheric trough, a TUT, that's going to be screaming its way out of the Gulf of Mexico, out of the southeast, that's creating our significant weather hazards here in the U.S., and that's what's going to help to instigate all that leftover garden variety moisture you can see just to the left-hand side of where my head is on the screen. I guess I should use this hand. Nope. Let's go this way. There we go. Off to the left-hand side of where my head is physically, you can see all that leftover abundant moisture that's over the mainland areas of Colombia, Venezuela, getting into the Guianas just off towards the east. That trough is going to act like a crane, if you will, and scoop it all up, or a shovel almost. Scoop all that equatorial moisture, put it out over the Caribbean, and just suck it north, thanks to our 500 and 300, almost 200 millibar wind flow. Unfortunately, for our eastern Pacific, dead in the water. We're losing favorability chances. We're losing developmental chances on both of these disturbances. The percentages continue to go down, and it's looking very likely that nothing's going to happen. So unfortunately, we're already off to what looks to be not one, but two busts for the hurricane season. And we'll talk just very faintly on that. It's very interesting, too, because they're in a very susceptible area for tropical organization, but they're just not going to execute. They have the 30 to 31 degree water temps right underneath them. Very low shear environment, as you can see right through here. So things are good, but they're just not going to make it off that Pacific monsoonal trough. Here, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that, folks. We're back. So, let's get right into it, shall we, now that we're going in. So, this is what we're looking at. We're back on Weather Nerds. We haven't used this as often as we used to, but we're going to start delving into it a little bit more now. And the reason I like to use this is because we can zoom in on our locations out there. It's not like tropical tidbits, it's not like weather models to where we can only get so close in terms of where it is that we're trying to investigate. So now we're going to take a bit of a closer look at what's expected. And as you probably saw clicking on the live stream thumbnail, what we have happening is this moisture is going to try to consolidate, and we're going to get more of an upper level induced low pressure system. I know it's very easy, especially for the time of year. A lot of us, including myself, were almost betting on some preseason activity. This is more or less kind of like an upper level tease. It's going to be like, I'm going to give you a low, I'm going to give you something to look at, but it's not quite going to be Tropical Storm Alberto. Okay, we're going to have you fishing and developing a little bit of patience as we go through. But what we want to pay close attention to here on the GFS anyways, and we'll look at the Euro, we'll look at our ensembles as well to nail down the precip forecasts. This is what I'm looking at more so than anything. If you look at this very, very sharp contrast in our colors here, the GFS, which is what we saw happen a lot last year as well, is very, very ambitious in terms of its overall total precipitation accumulation or rainfall totals as this system lifts up back out of the Caribbean Sea into the Western Atlantic and then finally gets pulled out, ripped apart by our next upper level trough that's going to come off the mainland U.S. But this corridor here for the Dominican Republic looks very, very interesting. We have totals trying to get upwards of a foot of rainfall. Do I think that's going to happen? Could it? Yes. Do I really have confidence? Not so much. And we'll go ahead and explain over a little why. And a lot of this also, as kind of indicated by our thumbnail, is going to really be determined by exactly how much wiggling and wobbling this system does. Or I should technically be using the terminology this moisture plume has, the margin of error in its forward progress. This really isn't going to be a consolidated feature. I've seen some folks mentioning tropical wave. This is far from a tropical wave. This is not a tropical wave. 150%. First of all, tropical waves will originate from the MDR, as we all know. They come off of Africa most of the time, or they'll try to get a little bit of that vorticity, that cyclonic curvature out there in the equatorial waters closest to our convergence zone, the intertropical front, the intertropical convergence zone, however you want to describe it. So this is definitely not it's not tropical, truthfully, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes and try to make it sound like I'm right, they're wrong, or they're right, I'm wrong. But I can tell you right out of the bat, just, thinking in terms of synoptic meteorology, this is not going to be a tropical origination or a tropical of origin kind of feature here. It's going to bring a lot of rainfall, but it's just the upper level pattern that's going to be driving it for all intents and purposes. So as I mentioned, we started off with our weather nerds because we can't quite zoom in as far as I would like us to on weather models. I'll zoom the page in, and I just got to remember to shrink it back down for you guys. But this is our 0Z overnight European ensembles. And if you guys have tuned in for my live streams when covering the flooding events in the United States or even in the past tropical seasons, you want to use your ensembles for your precip forecast. You want to get a general consensus, an average, a mean of what is likely to occur. For example, we just saw 12 to almost 16 inches on the GFS. If I mention 12 to 16 inches, period, that's my forecast, then Dominican Republic, Haiti, the island of Hispaniola is in trouble. They're going to be underwater, so we have to look elsewhere. And so we're coming over to our reliable, handy-dandy European ensembles, and as you can see, a night and day difference alongside the fact that the European ensembles do seem to favor a little bit more of a westward shift in our strongest or greatest precipitation column. You can see now the island of Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic, however you want to classify it, is now sitting comfortably between 2.5, well, I should say 1.4 to 2.5, maybe trying to squeak into that 3-inch margin closest to the southern coastline where you can see just a very, very faint whisper of darker shades of coloring right along that southern coast, the southern banks of the island there. So again, huge margin of error. GFS, 12 to 14 inches, you guys are swimming for the rest of the year. European model, 2 to 3 inches. Obviously, we want to meet in the middle somewhere, which means that given this huge bias one way or another, I would comfortably predict, just looking at these two layers of data, we could probably see anywhere between 3 to 5, maybe squeaking into that 6-inch margin threshold of rainfall, because we have to remember the GFS is a very, very zealous model. We saw that when it tried to form already a major hurricane in the eastern Pacific, and now we're getting nothing out of it. We have to remember it is trying to form Tropical Storm Vince all over again, insider guys, all over again in the Caribbean, and that's more than likely not going to take place here. We're not going to get a named storm out of this. And what is ending up happening is we have our Euro being very conservative, like it always does. 2 to 3 inches max, GFS 12 to 16. So we're going to come to a general consensus and meet in the middle. If you take this loop even further in time, you can see that as we march forward, this is 360 hours into the future. This is officially the turn of the calendar into the hurricane season. We are now ending the loop on June 2nd. So pay no attention to these total accumulations here. In fact, I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I presented to you guys a 24-hour, here we go, a 24-hour precipitation model. We're not going to use total. In fact, shame on me for bringing that up. So as you can see, the Euro is far more conservative, actually taking our rain chances closer to the eastern shoreline of Jamaica and eastern Cuba before we finally see a little bit more of that intrusion into Dominican Republic, where it maxes out at about the 150-hour mark, sitting around 1.4 to 1.6 inches. So an even greater disparity if we look at 24-hour precip. We switch on over to our GFS and we take a look at our 24-hour precipitation on this, and notice right out of the gate that the GFS has a bit more of a westward kink or an eastward kink to it. The Euro is biased to the west, the GFS is biased to the east. This is also something that's going to dramatically impact our rainfall totals and our overall phenomena that we observe with this feature. We're also going to see an uptick in winds. We will get dark conditions with this. We are going to have tropical-esque conditions with it because we're also moving over very hot water. So regardless of if the shear works out, if the barotropicness or the warm core nature of this system works out, we are going to have very similar phenomena occurring to this, similar to that of a tropical depression or a very low-end, sloppy, as we would like to call it, tropical storm. Will it get designated? No. Will it get named? No. Will National Hurricane Center stamp it? God, I hope not, because if they do stamp it, we're opening the floodgates. Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. I appreciate that. So the island of Hispaniola. I'm pretty sure I said that a little while ago, but yeah, Dominican Republic is on the right-hand side or the eastern side. So anyways, the island of Hispaniola seems to be our target area, and that's where our rainfall chances are likely to go up as we get into the middle parts of next week. It looks like our time frame is going to be anywhere from Tuesday. We'll begin to see the initial influence, not only in the upper levels, but of that moisture beginning to surge up from the south. And we have to remember that as that moisture source comes in and our upper level environment begins to shift, there's no saying we won't have precursor thunderstorms igniting just through daytime heating, orographic or mechanical lift induced by our mountainous terrain out there as well. And that's another thing too, is we have to remember, if we are going to speculate that this has the potential to develop, it's going to travel exactly in the same fashion that Tropical Storm Franklin did last year. And it wasn't until Franklin got closer to Bermuda where dudes started to bomb out and really develop. So we're not in a very favorable position for this thing to take on organized tropical characteristics. Another thing I want us to pay close attention to that I haven't seen very many sources mention is we're focusing on this, and we're hoping for that first named storm. But we also have what looks to be a very, very modest tropical wave at best working its way up through the ITCZ. And if you look, the GFS and the Euro are both in agreement that once we get beyond 150 hours, notice that down towards the Guianas, northern South America approaching Venezuela, and the Windward Islands, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados out there, are going to see rain chances really start to go up as that wave comes in. You see it right there populate through. We see our rain chances go up, and that's going to kind of be our double-edged sword to increase our rain chances once again. So it's going to be a 1-2 punch as we move through this pattern. So now we're going to move over to the GFS. This is everyone's favorite model. I don't know why. Every single weather source out there, including me, will talk smack about the GFS. And then the moment the GFS starts to highlight something, oh my God, the GFS. It's like, how many times is this thing going to play cat and mouse with us? How many times are we going to fall into this trap? So you take it through time, and there she is. You can see a little bit of whatever you want to call this being stamped as a low pressure center. Very, very, very weak in nature. At the minimum, we get about 1,005, 1,006 millibar central pressure, and even then, I don't know what this is trying to indicate. You can still see, once again, as we briefed yesterday, in our thickness lines, we have our upper tropospheric trough, the Tut, coming out from the west, headed to the southeast, and that's just going to help rake everything up, like so. That's essentially what's happening. Oh boy, I forgot already to shrink the page down. Let me shrink it down so you guys can see. There we go. Much better. That's a lot more crystal clear. So that is essentially what's happening, and I'll draw it once again for you guys in different colors. So we have our upper level pattern that's moving in off the mainland North American continent like so. I'll use a different color and we'll move over to our red. And what's going to end up happening, and you can see it in our thickness lines here, is we have what's called a tropical upper tropospheric trough that's forming up, and the axis is going to be oriented northeast to southwest like so. And if you think about this, just using the general physics of what the environment does, and you picture this over the United States, this is exactly what gives us our severe weather phenomena in the U.S. We have a trough coming in, and what's going to happen is we're going to have our moisture fetch just out ahead of it being pulled up in that divergent area of our jet stream, and that's what's going to help to try to induce not only our heavy rainfall and our higher wind field, but a little bit of that low pressure development. So that's another reason why I want you guys to please don't fall into the tropical trap. Like I said last year, or like we've been saying on this channel, don't fall into the Vince. Don't get fixated on the fact that we're so hyped for hurricane season, we're going to cling to the first thing that pops up. We switch on over to our European model, and this is the perfect representation of what's happening. If you guys weren't picking up what I was drawing on the previous portion of the brief, there's our trough axes. And as we all know, with the basic physics of how troughs behave, we have divergence aloft. And notice we have great diffluence in the streamlines here, which is essentially the spreading of the air, allowing for rising motion in the low levels, and that's what typically helps to induce our low pressure. Very disorganized, very heavily sheared. If I clear the ink and come over to our shear, look at that. Way too much shear. There is nothing going to form there, and I love the fact that even our shear model does a great job of highlighting our upper trough that's going to be working its way through 500, 300, 200 millibars up in the atmosphere. So I really don't think that's what's going to spawn a tropical system. You take it through further in time, and as this system, if you can imagine, if you extrapolate it forward and bring it up towards the north, it's going to wander even further into an unfavorable environment, and we're going to leave those warmer sea surface temps. I have that pulled up as well. We do have very optimal sea surface temps out there, but the moment it emerges to the north, we have our giant cool bubble here. All right, give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Got a lot of ruckus in the household today. So as soon as it comes right out of the Caribbean, crosses Dominican Republic and Haiti, maybe tries to get a close call towards Puerto Rico and up their rain chances as well, it's going to wander into unfavorable territory, both in terms of the wind shear and our waters. They're going to drop below the developmental threshold, or that hot spot, the sweet spot for the tropics. We're going to come on over to our icon model because I want us to look unbiased. We have the Euro, which everyone praises as the best. We have the GFS that a lot of folks will say is the worst. So we're going to meet in the middle, and we're going to look at the icon model at 500 millibars. So as you can see here, we have our trough swinging in. In fact, let's stop right now, current time. This is what's creating our severe weather in the southeast. Notice our jet max right in through there. We have 50, 60, 70 knot wind barbs just out ahead of our trough. So there's our really good 500 millibar trough axes that's scraping through the Gulf Coast, that's been producing again and again, time and time again, really uncomfortable conditions, tornadoes, lots of widespread flooding. This is a huge flood event. We had our derecho, however you want to describe it or pronounce it. It originated in eastern Texas and moved all the way through to Florida. Now, obviously, it didn't have the same punch. It didn't pack the same level of intensity as it passed through Florida, but you get the big picture. It moved all the way across Texas through the southeast quadrant of the U.S. So if we track this through time and watch closely, and I'll show you the 500 millibar anomalies as well for a bit easier of a color coding for you to pick up on, you take it through, and I'll step us through slowly. This is what's going to help produce our severe weather again today and into tomorrow. You can see that trough making its way off the shoreline. And finally, as we roll into early next week, we're starting to see a ridge build back in behind it. And as we all know, the atmosphere has to adjust for these differentials. So as our ridge back behind it begins to build, what ends up happening is the wind spilling over the apex of the ridge has to deepen our trough. It's how we kind of keep a state of equilibrium. And there's never a chance that the atmosphere will reach that bona fide equal state and will be completely balanced across the spectrum. It's just not going to happen. That's why we have severe weather. That's why we have jets. That's why we have basic mechanical physics across the planet. It's never going to happen, but the Earth tries to take on that equilibrium state. I forget the term. I just had the name in my mind. There's a name for it. Homeostasis. Homeostatic environment across the planet. It's never going to happen. So as you can see, once that ridge really begins to build in, you can see right up here towards the top left corner of the chart, we have very strong winds funneling over that ridge. That's going to help to bring it up. It's going to help to intensify it. Wherever there's a jet max, the strong winds, help to really agitate and amplify your long wave pattern, your troughs, your ridges, the big ones. So as you can see, as these new winds come across the plains, this could possibly be another severe weather event for the plains. This ridge is going to build, and in response to that, downstream, see how our trough is extending down towards the south? And notice right in through here, we have that weakness in our upper level flow. Our strongest core of winds is still upstream. It's coming in. But as we have a weakness in our upper level environment, you can see it here, our contour gradient pattern is very loosely packed. So what's going to happen is as this area scrapes or just digs south, it's really going to rake all that stuff up. I want you to pay close attention. I'll change the color. I want you to look right in through here, this little parallelogram. Watch what happens down there. So here comes our winds, here comes our winds, here comes all that trough energy. You see that? See how our vorticity just gets scooped up? And then we have two upper lows according to the model here. We have one there and one there, and that creates the perfect fire hose effect for all that vorticity just get raked up and popped out into the central and western Atlantic. And if you guys remember yesterday, for those of you watching, you got to remember that the distinct, what's what I'm looking for? I need more caffeine. You want to remember the two distinct misnomers between tropical and non-tropical. If it starts in the low levels and builds upwards, tropical. If it starts in the upper levels and builds downward, not tropical. And what we have going on here is something that's really associated with our upper level influence spilling down towards the surface. And if I rapidly switch back over to our MSLP, you can see there really is no low pressure. It's all just moisture. It's all moisture by our icon. You can see it getting pulled up towards the north. And that's it. You get a little bit of lowering pressure here, but please don't pay too close attention to that. Don't put a whole lot of faith in that. What the model is showing, once again, is as that area, if you remember, as that divergent flow comes across, you're going to have that rising air. So we'll have localized low pressure down at the surface, but that's about it. GFS, again, also does a phenomenal job of showing that it will probably not organize, but it is going to produce a large area of very heavy rainfall. This is our 700 to 300 relative humidity, or our moisture in the atmosphere. And as that trough mixes in, it's going to bring down lots of dry air getting wrapped up in its vortex, wrapped up in that plume as it gets scooped up towards the north. So again, very heavy rainfall threat. With that pressure gradient around in our upper level winds, we're definitely going to see enhancement down in the low levels. So we are going to have a heavy rain and wind event for our folks down there in the island of Hispaniola. The Turks and Caicos, Jamaica will probably see some western side enhancement from it, is what we'll call it. We'll see some daytime thunderstorms that could induce a little bit of localized heavy rain, localized flooding, and Puerto Rico is going to be in the direct channeling of all that moisture as well, which is why on my thumbnail I have that giant margin of error. Red is where our heaviest impacts could be felt. Yellow on either side is where this system could wiggle and wobble, and you could still feel a little bit of a side swipe or a close shave by it. As you can see here, National Hurricane Center really not seeing much. Nothing expected over the next 7 days. As of early this morning, they're not looking at anything. They have nothing written in their discussion. So they're probably looking at it and understanding the mechanics that we're looking at here, not anticipating it. We've already looked at this, the sea surface anomalies, and I will leave you guys with this to whet your taste buds for the tropics. Give me one more second. All right, wow, okay. So, to wrap up, I will whet you guys' taste buds. Like I said, this is a special tropical update. I wanted to kind of get my thoughts out there very briefly, very quickly. We have a lot going on today, and I will definitely continue to update you guys as we go through the weekend. And if anything else comes up, we'll blast it out here on the YouTube channel. So, for those of you looking for our tropical activity, I'm still very hard sold that the early portions of June, and especially the middle to latter parts of June, are where it's at. We're probably going to see our first named system as we go through the month of June. As you can see, this is our latest CFS valid for early this morning, and we have lots of really good rising air that comes back around for Central America, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. If you rewind, this is where we sit right now. Not a very conducive environment. We have lots of really bad downward forcing across that area thanks to the positioning of our MJO that will slowly but surely get back into an excited state and help to intensify that upper level rising motion over our tropical basin. So there you go. Here is this building in, and it stays there for a considerable amount of time. I don't know why it gets cut off on this overlay, but this is all the way towards the back end of June, where we finally see our upper level environment become a lot more favorable to support any kind of tropical activity, whether it be a disorganized wave or disturbance, or all the way up to Tropical Storm Alberto. And then finally, last but not least, this is going to be our latest control member of our upper level vorticity anomaly, indicating that the Euro is also seeing it as well. We're going to be wandering, once we cross June 1st, right there, and you move continuously through time down towards the latter half, or the entire month of June almost altogether, from the Central Atlantic, not the Central Atlantic, from the Central American landmass here and further to the east, we're going to be in very, very favorable conditions, very, very favorable setup for that tropical development. So, with that being said, guys, we'll go ahead and wrap up. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comments section down below, and we will get back to you. But as of right now, the key takeaway here is you don't want to worry too much out there if you're in the Caribbean. It looks like our threat chances are going to start to go up as we go through Monday, and especially Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Our trough axis is going to come in, scoop up all that leftover moisture from South America, try to spin up a little bit of low-level, cyclogenesis or a low pressure, but no tropical activity just yet. We're going to have to wait and see on that, but there will be a flood threat, and you will see some high winds from this. Definitely tune in on Monday if you're watching, so we can talk about this a little more in depth. 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll cover you down as we get ready to ride this out, and it'll be our first, I guess you can call, weather event for the tropical season. We're getting closer, guys, but thank you all very much for watching. Like I said, I got to conclude very quickly. Get ready for the rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. This is Weather Center Nazario signing out.